I'm actually a Master's of Architecture student, so I'm a little bit of an outsider here. For the last year and a half, I've been working at the Waterloop Team. So this is our team about a year ago. This is our team growing, this is about half a year ago. So I worked on the design of our Waterloop, and I also worked on the administration side of things, so marketing, sponsorship, Kickstarter, as well as being the tech lead for the shell. So this is our pod at SpaceX at the competition in January. This is a shot inside of it. It's kind of a cool money shot. As a brief overview for anyone who doesn't know, a Hyperloop is essentially a next generation transportation system. And what makes it different from anything that we have currently is it runs in a vacuum tube, it levitates, and it can be run completely on electricity. So this means the whole system could be solar powered. If we are able to implement this, it would be a huge change. Imagine being able to travel as fast as an airplane, but for a fraction of the price and with zero jet fuel expended, and essentially zero impact on the environment. So there's several systems involved. This is the shell, the levitation system, lateral control, friction braking, eddy current braking, drivetrain, and this is the SpaceX test track, which is actually the second largest vacuum chamber in the world, second only to the Large Hadron Collider. And so a lot of you might be wondering, what is an architect doing on the Hyperloop team? I often wonder this as well. But the real reason why I started is actually about the infrastructure. In architecture, you learn a lot about how cities work, and I found it really interesting that in the 1950s, in Fort Worth, they did a study and they found that no matter how much car infrastructure they added, they couldn't relieve congestion. Didn't matter how many lanes or how many parking lots or how many parking garages, what happened was the city spread out more and more and more, people had to get farther, and congestion just increased. So this means every time you hear about something in the media about fixing the 401 with more lanes or something like that, it's probably not the route. So I'm a big proponent of public infrastructure. And this is, was widely published in Jane Jacobs' book in 1961, one of the most seminal books on urban design. And yet, you can still see today, we still have problems with this on the 401. So for this reason, I think what the Hyperloop actually represents is really this trend now to reject the past and say we can do much, much better. So I see it as really a societal change of us going, okay, that worked for a while. What is going to be our strategy now? And you know, it's actually not a new idea. It started at the Crystal Palace in the 1850s. Here's Robert Goddard in 1910 with his idea. And it only really took off to the extent that it has in 2013 when Mr. Elon Musk, shown here at the SpaceX competition with our pod, when he started talking about it in 2013. And he kind of created this impossible scenario and promised everyone that it would happen, and had no work to support it at the time. So he said, we're going to combine economy and sustainability and respond to this social problem. And you know, his response to actually making that happen was this competition, which is what we're working on. And I think this is kind of a impossible problem, because oftentimes we have to pick two. You know, you can be fast and cheap, but it's not going to be great. And then he threw in the bonus, it's going to be cool too. His actual website has a ton of other constraints, that's a simplification. But yeah, generally speaking, you get to pick good, fast, or cheap, only two of those. There's a lot of different variations of this saying. Here's a good one for designers, and here's a good one for life, money, time, or children, pick two. Skipping around a little bit here. Okay, so I think that's also what he's trying to promise in his Tesla, the new Model 3. It's the promise of sustainability, it's the promise of economics. It's cheaper than his other models, and it also looks pretty cool. And so moving back to the architectural space, I've kind of tried to bring this impossible scenario into the city and doing it through technology. So there's this phenomenon in cities where a neighborhood, because it's dense and diverse, will get very, very popular. And because of that, there'll be a trend to develop a lot of buildings there. And what happens is they actually start to carve away and remove what once made it a really popular neighborhood. And this was a problem with such as St. Jamestown in Toronto, which is actually recovering, but you'll see areas like Young Street that are having a lot of condo developments. A lot of the fabric that makes it really special is probably going to be disappearing in the near future. And so what my thesis work is actually trying to do is put the city into a parametric environment and find some sort of resolution. The idea being, if we can control through urban guidelines or taxation brackets where those developments are happening, to an extent, then you can actually spread out the vitality as opposed to having these harsh fluctuations of land value going up and down, that you can actually spread out the development and have the entire city rise as a whole. And what this means is that everyone wins. You, as a citizen of the city, win because your entire city is being rejuvenated all at once. And as well, the developers win because over the span of decades, land value across the entire city is increasing. And a concrete example of how architectural problems happen, there seems to me a sort of misunderstanding sometimes that things just are the way they are because that's the technology that got innovated. But I love the example of Copenhagen. It's my favorite city, and everyone knows it as the biking city. And it wasn't always that way. In the 1950s, they had the same problems as us with their car infrastructure until there were a lot of public protests and guideline changes. And now that same square looks like this. And it's a much more friendly city to pedestrians now. So that's a really concrete example of how the city can change through these sort of guidelines. So, switching modes back to the tech industry. So I think we have this issue when we look forward into the future, how technology is going to affect us. And there's a lot of really dark narratives about what could possibly happen. But I don't think that's the case. I think everyone in this room probably doesn't think that is the case. There's a lot of optimism in the tech industry. From net neutrality to diversity in the workplace and universal basic income. But what my question becomes, though, is what future are we actually making? Out of curiosity, who here in the room knows that Silicon Valley was largely founded on the ideology of Ayn Rand? There's a couple. Okay, who disagrees with that out of curiosity? Okay, cool. So I would say, I would argue that not only are we in the midst of a technological revolution, but also to an extent a cultural revolution. So I'm going to do this a little bit differently. Instead of telling you something, I'm going to ask you to tell me something. And I'm going to ask you, what is your ideology? Is it Marxian? Have you read Lefebvre? Have you thought about old sci-fi, new sci-fi? What is the world that you are trying to create through your technology? And so I guess this is coming from the idea that in architecture, what we talk about a lot of the times is not just the design, but also how we're impacting society. So I'm wondering if maybe it's not enough anymore to just work in automation and just be a leader or a coder in that capacity, but also to become an expert on universal basic income at the same time. Or if you work in the tech health sector, to be an expert on universal healthcare. And in the same capacity also to, for the Hyperloop, not only just be an expert on the Hyperloop, but also accessible, good, and cheap transportation that everyone can use. So I'm going to do a presentation faux pas, just so I can get the phrasing right, on what my question is exactly. So, since technology will disrupt so many industries over the next few decades, I think we're at a point in which we can choose our future. As an outsider in a profession that is traditionally about the transformation of society, looking in towards the tech industry, I'm wondering not just what kind of technologies are you building, but what kind of society are you looking to build enabled by technology? And how are we going to get there from a social and political perspective, and how can we do so in an economically viable way? So I think that the answer perhaps is building on those impossible pick 3 scenarios that Elon Musk has presented. Going out there and saying that not only can I make this faster and cheaper and sustainable, but I'm going to make it accessible to everyone. So, thank you.
Wow. When we were chatting in advance and I saw that there was like 30 slides here, I'm like, you have 5 minutes, right? but somehow you got through them all, and that was awesome. Any quick questions?
Where to start?
Where to start?
How is the Hyperloop different from, let's say, air travel today? I mean, obviously, it's not the same technology. You're talking about making it cheaper. You're talking about making it greener. But at the end of the day, you can only go from point A to point B, right? If I want to get from my house to somewhere relatively close by, I'm not going to be taking the Hyperloop. So how does it really solve the large-scale problem that is transportation in general?
Definitely. Okay. So I think there's a lot of elements at play. Hyperloop will never solve all transportation. It's only really designed for a specific scenario in which you're traveling between two cities, approximately LA to San Francisco. Why I think the idea is really interesting is that it's kind of inspired people to start talking about infrastructure again, something that the public hasn't really been too excited about unless it's fixing the 401 in a while. And while we're talking about that, I think it's interesting to bring up that discussion for all modes of transit and kind of raise the bar of expectation across the board. You know, as a very easy example, look up Bjarke Ingel Group did a proposal with Hyperloop One in which they said, if I want to take the Hyperloop, I want it to be a seamless experience. So I call it on my phone like an Uber. Car shows up, it drives me into a Hyperloop, and then I travel from there, and it takes me to my ultimate destination. So I think long-term, the solution will be a really strong integrated network of a variety of modes of transportation.
Cool.
So I read about you a couple months ago, and it's like from here to Montreal in like 2 hours, is that right? Or is that...
You're looking closer to 30 minutes.
Oh, 30 minutes, oh, okay. So what do you, but so it's not like a commuter train, right? Like would it stop in Toronto, or is it literally just going like point A to point B, right? Because how does it slow down?
Yeah, so you would, the most ideal scenario for the technology would really be point A to point B. So whichever cities you have on that line, you really want to beef up that network. So most likely what you would do is have some sort of link between Waterloo and Toronto that would be probably a little bit lower speed, and then have the full high-speed network between Toronto and Montreal. Basically, the goal throughout your entire journey is to conserve as much momentum as possible, give you a really big kick at the beginning, gradually over time. So that means the acceleration you're feeling is really, really minimal, but you work up to incredibly high speeds, around 900 kilometers an hour. And you won't feel like you're moving at 900 kilometers an hour because you're no longer being accelerated, and you were being accelerated at a reasonable speed, pace. And then when you decelerate, you'll also be decelerating at a pace which is the most comfortable for a human. Does that answer?
Yeah, people thought I was crazy when I told them.
Obviously, the Hyperloop is not just like an average project. You have to have a lot of regulations that pass. You have to make it a legitimate idea. So one, what's the estimated time frame for this to be a reality if it is one? And two, what's Waterloop's idea? Like, what's your goal? Is it to kind of control the Canadian Hyperloop world, or are you going to go everywhere?
For the second part, we're really focused on the competition at the moment. We are in an interesting position where not many people have ever shown a prototype yet. Even the companies working on it, Hyperloop Transit Technologies and Hyperloop One, neither of them have shown a prototype. So that does put us in a position where we are, one of 20 people in the world who have shown a functional prototype. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess maybe I'm just alluding to maybe there's more beyond that. Actually, sorry, could you remind me what the first part of the question was?
Or is there
Or is there some sort of timeline as to when
yes.
Hyperloop can be a reality?
Right. I think realistically, the two biggest constraints are going to be the track and if you are able to implement it politically and publicly through public and political opinion. The reason being, maintaining a vacuum over that distance is very difficult. As I said, the only larger vacuum than the 1 mile test track is the Large Hadron Collider. So I think that's going to be probably one of the biggest stumbling blocks. If we can crack that, that'll be a huge breakthrough. And the next real breakthrough is really getting the approvals to do it. If people want it to happen, I think it can happen.
Great. Well, I know there's more questions, but we've already run a bit out of time, so I'll have to cut it off there. But thank you, Monty.
All right, thank you very much for having me.